Ahí va a ser.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Rutherford Board of Education for November 12th, 2018. And I would first ask everyone to please stand and we'll pledge allegiance to this flag.
On Veterans Day.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thank you for being here this evening. First order or second order of business would be to ask the secretary to please do roll call.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Here.
Dr. Owadi,
He informed me that he would be unable to attend.
and Mr. Healy,
Here.
Mrs. Jones,
Present.
Mrs. Librera,
Here.
Mr. Mazzone,
Here.
Dr. Racine,
Here.
Mr. Rowland,
Here.
Mr. McLean.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Rutherford Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place posted on the bulletin board outside of the Borough Clerk's office, mailed to the Herald, South Bergenite, and Record newspapers, and filed with the Borough Clerk. Hard copies of the agenda are available here in the meeting room, and the agenda is posted electronically on Friday before the meeting date on the district's website at www.rutherfordschools.org. Regular meetings of the Rutherford Board of Education will be broadcast without editing during a 2-hour segment as limited by Comcast time constraints on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. on the Comcast Public Access Channel and on FiOS Channel 38. A video of this meeting can also be viewed on our website at www.rutherfordschools.org. The video link can be found by opening the Board of Education link and clicking on Public Meetings and then Videos. Any member of the public who wishes to view a DVD of this meeting can make that request in writing to the board secretary. In your, members of the board, in your packets were the minutes of the regular meeting of October 22nd and the executive session minutes of that same evening. Are there any questions or comments or changes that anyone would like to propose to those minutes? Hearing none, I would ask the secretary to please enter those into the record and post them. Our student representative is not with us this evening, so we'll move right on to report of the superintendent, please.
Okay, good evening and welcome. First, I'd like to, the student rep, I'm sure would have mentioned some of this, but I do want to congratulate our high school volleyball team who won the state sectional championship and was defeated in the Grade 2 final this Saturday at William Patterson from Demarest High School. Excuse me, defeated by Demarest. They had a record of 29 wins and 2 losses. And the 29 wins is more wins than any team in any sport has ever garnered here at the high school. So that's congratulations to them. The football team will be playing against Lyndhurst on Friday night in the state sectional final. That's the game, the same level of game that was played in previous years at MetLife Stadium, Giant Stadium, or Rutgers. The state has added a round now to the playoff system. So the winner of the sectional, in most sports it goes beyond the sectional, it goes to overall state. But with football, with the time element and the weather conditions and the amount of time you need between games, they can't go that far. But they added now a North Jersey champion. So the winner of Section 1 and the winner of Section 2, which we're in, would then play each other in either Giants MetLife Stadium or Rutgers or wherever they put the game for that next game. So winning or losing the game Friday night is the same level, the ultimate game from last year. They've added another round, and then that game would move on. So also at the high school this weekend is the school play Barefoot in the Park, which is Friday and Saturday night. So that's what's going on at the high school. But a lot of good things happening throughout the district. Just a couple that came up, Washington School, we've been talking a lot about the Writers' Workshop, and Washington School has now partnered with the Teachers College, Columbia University's writing program partner. So they're going to have a series of training for their teachers, grade level, throughout the year. I think 5 or 6 of those. Lincoln did a similar partnership in previous years. Over at Lincoln, with the election last week, Lincoln ran a election among the second graders. The vote was, I believe, postponed until either Wednesday or today, so I don't have the results. It was between no homework for a week or ice cream sundaes for everybody. And they had a political rally with campaigns and posters and speeches and voting, and they had different jobs assigned to different people. And it was. I think this is make believe. I think this is make believe. On both counts, is make believe. But a lot of good things are going on. For the 5th year in a row, as I mentioned, we received the Safe School Safety Award from our School Alliance Insurance Fund, and there's been little, plaques and things like that to put in offices, but now because it's 5 years, we receive a plaque with each of the years noted. Credit goes to Mr. Paterno and the maintenance and custodial crew, because they oversee the majority that all things are being done properly in buildings and grounds according to the highest level of safety and operational standards. And 5 consecutive years is nice to get that honor, but also it reflects in a reduction on some of the insurance premiums, which is, so there's a monetary value in it as well. So congratulations to everyone. And Mr. Kelly, always gives the credit to Mr. Paterno and the department, and well deserved, but they report directly to, Mr. Paterno reports directly to Mr. Kelly, who also works on the Safe School Initiative. So congratulations to him as well. The CUSAC, we've been mentioning that. The visit is scheduled for January 4th. We have not yet received notice of the site visits of the buildings. That's the county and state monitoring of our schools. We are very busy preparing and diligently preparing the vast amount of documentation that the state wants to see to support the areas that they look at in fiscal and in operations, in governance, in basically as curriculum, but as programs and instruction, and why is the last one? Personnel. So in those areas, they really look at everything from soup to nuts in terms of looking at how we're functioning. And at the December meeting, following the meeting of the CUSAC committee that we formed, and Mrs. Jones represents the board on that committee, we'll present to the public and to the board our self-evaluation based on the rubrics and based on the evidence that CUSAC will be looking at. And then when they come in on the 4th, they look at what we've done, they look at what we presented, and do their own judgment based on that rubric. And again, this has been a very community group effort in terms of the teachers and the administrators and the supervisors and the central office staff in going through this self-evaluation assessment of all of our programs. Following the referendum vote, as we've talked about, I think it's important that we take some time, not a tremendous amount of time, because I think the issues that were addressed, the referendum did address, are real issues that need to be looked at. But we're taking some time in terms of meeting with stakeholders. In the course beginning on October 4th and going right up until tomorrow, Mr. Kelly and I have met with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 15 separate meetings with various stakeholders who have either asked for a meeting or we've reached out to meet with, that represent the broad spectrum of points of view in terms of the facility questions. By that I mean people who were openly in favor, people who were to the referendum as was put forward, people who were opposed, people who had a specific point that they wanted to address about the plan, people that are new to the borough, people that have been in the borough for years and years and years, and also to people who are in positions of elected or appointed positions within the borough. And the idea of these meetings is just to gather information, to get feedback on what their feeling was about the plan, why they did or did not support it, what do they think, how do they think we should address these issues going forward. I've been trying to bring very little to the meetings other than some questions and some listening, so that we could hear what people have to say. In addition, as part of CUSAC, a climate survey goes out, a school climate survey goes out to all faculty, separate surveys, different surveys, to all faculty and staff, to selected students, not to all students, sample like you do in any survey, and to parents. And we're going to choose to send it out to all parents. And included in this survey, which really covers, again, curriculum and school safety and, school culture and co-curricular, all the things you'd expect about a school, we have put a few questions in regarding the facilities, specifically very general, open-ended questions. What are some of the things that you felt were most important to be addressed in the facilities plan? What are some of the things you think were not as important? Where did you get your information? What different types of information might you want to get? So again, to get that feedback, which will be done the week of November 29th, there'll be a 2-week window for folks to get those surveys back to us. And then in terms of speaking to the professionals and to speaking to the stakeholders and speaking to the folks involved in the school community and in the greater community of the borough, the Strategic Planning Committee and Communications Committee will meet in early December, and I'll present first to them and then secondly to the full board information that we've gathered and thoughts we've gathered. And depending on the information and depending on what we've gathered, perhaps a direction that I would recommend we go in, or perhaps to the committee, or perhaps we're not there yet for that recommendation. And then at the board meeting of December 10th, to have a discussion with the entire board about what I've learned, what I've shared with the committee, and whatever direction that the committee feels we should be going forward with. The most likely scenario, if there is going to be a second proposal, would be to look to move it in next fall for a vote. The only other window of opportunity to vote, for the community to vote prior to next fall, would be March. But although March seems like it's not so far away, but far enough away that we can get it done, the reality is that even one change to any of the plans that we had would require sending plans back to Trenton for a review, and they have a 90-day window to do that review, and you have to apply to run the election 60 days in front of the election. So it's inconceivable to think that any altered plans, even a minor alteration, could get approved in time on January 11th to put on a ballot in March. But I also think in terms of taking our time and moving a little bit away from the heat of the moment and hearing what people said already, right, in the election, and hearing what people say when we meet, gives us time as a body, gives you time as a body, to come forward with, if that's your choice, to come forward with a second plan that was reflective and thoughtful, like the last one was, but reflective and thoughtful, not an immediate reaction to the last result. So I think the time process and the plan is a good one. I don't want to comment, in fairness to trying to be totally objective and trying to listen. I don't want to comment on meetings that I've had to this date. I don't think it's fair to the people that I met with or people that I will be meeting with. Mr. Kelly and I meet together. But I will say this, they have been very, very positive meetings. They have been very informative meetings, and there's been a very good dialogue with every group that I met with, and I met with groups across that spectrum that I mentioned at the beginning. So that's where we're going in terms of the next step, and hopefully at the December 10th board meeting we'll have a less cryptic, and a more specific discussion based on a report that I could provide. The committee will have their comments, and then we'll see where it lands in terms of what kind of time frame we have going forward to come up with a decision of what we're doing next. Okay? So that's my report.
Any questions? Yes,
Is
Mrs. Jones.
there a date on the projected outlines that the board actually takes a vote to go forward? I don't see it. Says
Well, that
main board
outline is
vote.
very tentative. It's just to give you an idea of getting to March. It would be a very similar, hypothetically, I'm not sure what you mean by the vote to go forward, but hypothetically, what we would do is we would have a vote, let's say the end of January, hypothetically. The board would say, this is a plan, or it could be the beginning of February, right? This is a plan we'd like to go forward with, and we are authorizing, remember the last time? We're authorizing the submission of whatever plans have to be submitted down to Trenton. Now, the only plans that would have to be resubmitted is, say, one of the buildings was getting some altered plans, something taken away, something added, whatever. Only that building, because they were submitted not as individual projects within buildings, they were given project numbers in the state by building, right? If only one building was, just that one plan has to go. Everything else would hold, right? Then, similar to the last time, the state would have up to 90 days to get back. The logic is, if you're only sending a building or two down, right, or whatever the case may be, and you're only adjusting a little bit of plans within that it wouldn't need as much time to review, because the reviewer who's assigned to the case reviewed everything a few months ago. So he would focus in on what we earmark as changes, right? Once that comes back, just like the last time, you get that letter that would say your preliminary eligibility letter that says and my assumption, again, you don't like to make assumptions, especially with the state, but the assumption would be that it would be preliminarily approved for educational adequacy, remember this process, and then the board has a window of time to say, we accept that, or we want to challenge it. I mean, it's not much ever to challenge. Last time everything got approved, there was really everything but one thing got approved, so it was very little to challenge. Once the board doesn't challenge in that window, they send the final approval letter out. And then just like the last time, once that final approval is received by the district then can at any time decide to go forward with any part of that project to a vote. And if we're getting on a ballot in the fall, we'd have to do it similar to last time, at the latest in June.
Right.
Now, it may not go that long. It may be something that gets decided sooner than that. I mean, the sooner we decide, the more we know we're going forward. So that's the time frame. So just like the last time, the board's commitment in January or February or whenever it plays out to send any revised plan to Trenton is only a commitment to do that. The commitment to go forward with it as a vote comes later. Okay?
And then the September date that's looked at right now is the earliest In fact, if you remember, I think this past one, we had targeted September,
Got
and the
moved.
state changed it
Due to a holiday, a
October.
religious holiday,
Yeah.
right.
So I guess it's always subject
Yes.
to the
Well,
state maintaining that.
It's,
as the date.
yeah, the states are set in, I think they're set, Mr. Kelly, right, in code when you can run these elections, but when there's an extenuating circumstance like falling on a religious holiday or something like that, then they have the latitude to move it. Any other questions?
Other questions? So the school climate survey said there's a 2-week response time expected. Is there any level of expectation as to percentage that we want to get back, or need? Is there any threshold
Need
that
for
we need
CUSAC?
to
No.
achieve?
CUSAC, as far as CUSAC is concerned, they just want to see that the survey was done and submitted. Obviously, anytime you submit a survey, you'd like to get the biggest return that you can get, right? We decided, CUSAC folks, we talked about this, and the administrators, that we're going to give it to grades 3. So we get the oldest, we get the seniors in the elementary school, right? We grade 6, grade 6 and 8, and grades 10 and 11. So those would be the students that will get the survey. The survey is anonymous and is totally optional. They don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. They'll do it on their Chromebooks in school. We're going to give it to all faculty, and these are separate surveys. They're earmarked for the particular age group and the like. We're going to send to all faculty and staff. Again, they could do it if they would choose. And we're going to send to all parents and guardians.
All parents what?
And guardians, but parents. And again, I want to make sure the point's clearly understood. This is not a survey about facilities. It's not a survey about the referendum. It's a survey about all the things that get looked at in assessing a school, from extra help for students and homework and co-curricular and school climate and safety and all that kind of stuff. But we added a couple of questions to take advantage of the fact that we can gather some more information about the facilities in the referendum.
Okay. Moving on then to my report of the president, very quickly.
Sorry, Kim, can I just say one more thing? Just to be clear again, we did not add any questions about facilities or referendum to the students or the faculty or staff. Okay? We added to the parents, and we thought that was the most important aspect to hear back from because of the impact, the fiscal impact. You know, it wasn't going to be a wish list for students or a wish list for faculty and staff. It was going to be for the community members. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. So Dr. Eladi had a family situation arise late. He's not here, but I'd like to congratulate Mrs. Ahmed, Dr. Racine, and Dr. Eladi on your reelection to the board. I think it's I think it's it's a testament not only to the hard work that you've put in these past years, but it's a testament to the trust that the town puts in you and the thanks that the town puts in you for prioritizing the educational welfare of the students first. And as a member of the board, I'm glad to be serving with you further. So thank you.
Thanks. Good job.
So we talked about that in your packets, either digitally or hard copy as you requested, were the consolidated self-evaluation from our board self-assessments and the consolidated results. What we'll do is we will discuss that during our old business segment, and hopefully some of you might have some comments on that. I went through and marked up some comments, and we can discuss that. Certainly the second very important topic is the facility plan status, as Mr. Hurley was discussing, and I think the community at large and certainly all of us are anxious for what's next. Maybe thinking it should be moving faster, or wishing it were moving faster. I think that's all natural. As Mr. Hurley said, I think our goal is to be, deliberately objective. We want to make sure that we're doing a very unemotional fact-finding regarding, the postmortem of why the referendum that was put forward, which again, we know addressed real needs, why it failed, and what we need to do to come back with a second proposal that will continue to address as many of those needs as we can within the means that are available. So with that in mind, I know you all, as I have been getting some feedback from folks as I've, gone around town, it's important for us to be capturing that. The reason we're not discussing it at this point is, as Mr. Hurley said, there are still groups that we're collecting information from, and we want that first step to be a collection of information and then, distilling that. So what I would ask you to do, following the same, procedure and format we did in your pre-referendum questions, things you've collected from folks, comments from citizens and such, if you would be able to take the time, document them, and send them to Dr. Racine as the chairperson of the Strategic Planning and Communications Committee, we'll be able then to review them during the committee meeting and factor them into the report that Mr. Hurley will be preparing for us on December 10th. The committee is meeting on December 3rd. So it would be good to have those ahead of time, I guess, so you can consolidate, group together like questions that, as we did before. Yes?
What do you mean by document?
Just send an email.
Not dates and times and who?
No,
Right.
nothing like that. Just the essence of what, somebody,
I got it.
this is what I heard, that sort of thing, that types of things. And then, of course, your personal opinions are important as well. So, again, we will consolidate them and then be able to feed back to the group as a whole, what the summary of that is. Did Siri have something to say? That's okay. My wife's name is Sue, and every time I say, "Hey, Susie," the phone answers me. So it's like, anyway. Yes. So and so that's the process for us as board members to be able to submit the feedback and inputs that we have at this point. And then, as was discussed, starting December 10th, we'll start to have some deliberation and dialogue inside, at the meetings about what we've gathered and what we've collected. So that's it really for me, and we'll continue on if there's any questions, any other questions or comments. So we'll continue then into the work of the meeting. It's 8:01, and at this point in the agenda, we open the meeting to comments from the public for agenda items. So I'd ask if anybody has a comment regarding agenda items at this point. Seeing none. I will, with the board's agreement, I'll ask so that people who might have a comment on a non-agenda item don't have to wait through us going through all the business of the board before we get to that. If there's a comment on any point that someone would like to make, we'll accept that as well now. Yes? If you would just approach the mic, your name and your address, please, for the record, and then whatever your comment is. Thank you.
Goldarina Vincent, 26 Jackson Avenue. I'm not sure if this is on an agenda or not, but I want to know about transportation and what is the plan for it for next school year.
So I'm sorry, the question is about transportation.
Yes.
For the
bus and subscription, I believe it's called.
So between buildings, the
Yeah.
transportation back and forth between buildings for the 18-19 school year?
Yes.
So if you could address where, I don't think we would be at the point yet where that would have been determined.
For 18-19 it is.
Or 18-19, I'm sorry, 19-20.
If you go on the website,
Mm-hmm.
there's under transportation, there's a link for subscription courtesy busing.
Yeah.
and explains the process. Is that what you're asking, the process?
No, I know the process is, my daughter is always on it every year, but this year she didn't get it. And there's a number of parents that are like
Waiting
struggling,
list.
trying to get their kid back and forth to school. So I want to know, going forward with these kids that are not able to get on the bus, what is the plan of action for those kids?
Well, the plan of action is if we moved a couple of students up on from the waiting list on the bus, if we don't have the number of students to get a second bus, then it becomes a extremely cost prohibitive thing to do. This is something that's not required, right? It's something that we're doing it's both a courtesy to provide it. It's a subscription because the parents are paying for the bulk of the cost. Okay.
Okay.
When there's 5 or 6 or 7 kids on a waiting list, the only bus you're going to get is for 52 passengers, which is very expensive. So going forward, this year, every week or so, I get monthly reports from the administrators in each building on bus usage. And what we do is we then address if there's a bus where the ridership is low, we look at who it is that's missing, and are they missing consistently, and we then call those families to see if in fact they are desiring to stay on the bus or not, and we're encouraging them that since they signed up for it, paid for it, and there's a seat that someone else could occupy, that they take advantage of using it. And if, like I said, in a couple of cases this year, we were able to move students up. One of the other important things, and this, I don't want this to sound anything other than factual, I think it's very important that when that letter gets sent home, that you get on top of it right away and send it in, because the numbers have not been high. We've been right at about 50, 55, so it isn't as though there's 90 people looking. So the sooner you get that in going forward, the better it is. But if you want to send me an email, so I get your name and all that, send it to me. And what school we're talking about, which school she's going to, right? If you send me that email, I'll look into if there's any movement on the waiting list.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. If a parent had signed up and then not using it, and they say, no, we can give up that spot, is there a prorated?
Prorated money goes back.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll close the floor to the public for comment at 8:06 p.m. And we'll move into the agenda of where action will be taken, new business. And under personnel, Mrs. Ahmed, would you please explain to us what's on the agenda, and then after some discussion, move them, and we'll look for a second.
Okay, with your approval, I'd like to move motions 1 through 11. Number 1, Angelica Fernandez to accept her resignation. Also to rescind, and then number 2, Thomas O'Hara to rescind the appointment as a bus driver. 3, Lauren Muzinski, approve her as a long-term physical education teacher, along with number 4, Kyla McDowell, to approve her as a long-term substitute teacher and elementary teacher in Washington School. 5, Nicole Hutchinson, to approve her as a part-time teacher assistant at Pierpont. 6, Lori Catalano, to extend the unpaid child leave of absence. 7, substitute teacher, approve the following substitute teacher, and it ends up just to be 1, Patricia Menendez Padilla. 6, substitute teacher assistants, to approve the following substitute teacher assistant, Patricia Menendez Padilla. So 7 was to approve, that's a little confusing there. Yeah, well, it's the same one.
One's
So
a
they
teacher
approve her
assistant,
as
one's a teacher.
Right, assistant and for a teacher. Why am I not getting that? Substitute teacher, okay. 9, home instructor, to rescind and approve the following: to rescind Ricardo Carroll, assistant boys basketball coach, and to approve Kevin McGorry, assistant boys basketball coach, and Blake Broncata. volunteer assistant winter track coach. 11, travel reimbursements for the 2018-19 school year as listed. And that's it.
Thank you. As you've moved them, is there a second? Mr. Healy? And then I would ask if there are any questions or comments regarding these personnel items, 1 through 11. No questions? Ask the secretary to please pull the board.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Cabrera?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then to curriculum and instruction. Mrs. Jones, would you explain to us what's on the agenda?
I
And
will. There are 5 resolutions under CNI for board member consideration. Resolutions 1 and 2 require affirmation of the superintendent's decision for 2 HIV investigations. Resolution 3 is out-of-district placement. Resolution 4 is approval of the following field trips for this year, now totaling 81. And Resolution 5 is the emergency bus evacuation drills. It appears that all schools are done except the high school. They've been practicing. I don't know if there's anybody else, any other comments. These are pretty self-explanatory. If there are none, I move resolutions 1 through 5.
thank you. Seconded by Mr. Rowland. Questions or comments before we pull the board? Ask the secretary to please pull the board.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Cabrera?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then to finance. Mrs. Librera, would you please take us through that?
Sure. I'll open up by saying that we had our first Finance Committee meeting tonight for the preparation for the 1920 school budget. And the agenda for the discussion today was essentially to review the calendar of meetings that Mr. Kelly has laid out, inclusive of the Finance Committee meetings, but also meetings with administration, meeting with supervisors of the schools, meetings with the full board, and what those different milestones will be. So that was a full process that takes us through, I think, April. Was it April? A full calendar. So that was our first meeting tonight. There are 8 motions tonight for finance, including one addendum that was distributed separately tonight. Number 1 is the approval of bills. Number 2 is Secretary Treasurer's report for September of 18. 3, budget transfers for September of 18. 4, Secretary Treasurer's report for October of 18. 5, budget transfers for October of 18. 6 was transportation contracts for 3 students for the East Rutherford School District, 2S, just South Bergen Jointure, Maywood. And 7 was the use of the capital reserve for pre-referendum costs for the pre-approved pre-referendum costs that were approved on each of the meetings as listed, totaling $559,795, which included conceptual designs, environmental assessments, long-range facility plan amendments, and filing costs. And number 8 is environmental services, to authorize the additional expenditure of $14,450 for environmental investigation services at the Rutherford High School as required by NJDEP regulations at a cost not to exceed $14,450.
Any questions regarding? Yes, Mrs. Jones?
Forgive me if I'm just not knowledgeable enough. The $75,000 that's on October 22nd, 2018, is that's still regarding the October 2nd referendum? not the one forthcoming?
All this money was approved in the past for the
Right.
October, right, as pre-referendum cost for the reasons listed. And as was discussed at meetings, and Mr. Kelly wants to add, but was discussed at meetings, it was money from capital reserve that would be folded into costs needed, environmental studies and application fees and remediation if the environmental study showed anything that had to get done, and design fees and so on. What needed to be stated in the resolution was that this money was capital reserve money, even though that was stated, it wasn't in the resolution. So this is a resolution to indicate that that money, which was already moved and already expended, is part of capital reserve. So these are not new fees or
No, I-
costs.
Yeah, it was
only
just
the
to,
date that
yeah,
was
so
thrown
if we look at the minutes from the October 22nd meeting, it was item number 4 that had been moved, and only just some technicalities in the language that needed to be updated now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No? Are you formally moving?
I formally move 1 through 8.
And seconded by Mrs. Ahmed, with 2 coughs. Thank you. Any last questions or comments regarding these 8 resolutions under finance? Hearing none, I would ask the secretary to please poll the board.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Cabrera?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly on policy, are there anything to report this evening?
Actually, there have not been any committee meetings since our last board
Okay.
meeting, and there's no motions for tonight.
Thank you. And do we have the committee meeting scheduled?
Well, waiting to get the quarterly update from Strauss Esme, which will probably be December 1st, and then, so probably won't be till January, because I have to review them and share them with the administration,
Okay.
and we'll probably be moving some changes and additions, deletions sometime in January.
So, and we would have a committee meeting
Yes, sometime
prior
in
to that
January, right,
in
right.
January. Okay, very good, thank you.
Or it could even be December, but we won't move anything till January.
Okay. And then moving on to building and grounds, Mr. Mazzone?
Yes, so we've not had a committee meeting since our last meeting, but there are 2 agenda items for tonight. The first item that we should discuss is a donation. Donation accepted with gratitude, cabinets and furniture to Pierpont School from Starbos Siskes, I believe is the pronunciation. The second is the comprehensive maintenance plan. This is in requirement with DOE, requiring school districts to submit their 3-year maintenance plans, documenting required maintenance activities, all public schools and facilities, all past planned activities, reasonable to keep the facilities open, operational, safe, keep up with system warranties, and so forth. And this would authorize our district to have the business administrator submit the 2018-2019 comprehensive plan.
Any comments on that?
Okay.
Mr. Kelly, anything on the comprehensive maintenance plan that it's the normal routine?
Yeah, this is an annual report that's required. Basically, if you look at the spreadsheets here, they calculate what the state is telling us we should be spending to maintain our systems. And what it calculates is we should be paying, we should plan on budgeting for next year at least $113,000. Well, we typically budget in the range of $1 million, so we passed that hurdle with flying colors. So,
Okay.
so we're more than meeting, what the state considers our minimum requirement.
So if there's no,
Yes, Mrs.
One
Jones?
more question. The boilers in the high school, weren't they on schedule for this fall to be finished?
Yeah, they were. They are not getting done this year. The prices came in much higher than we had budgeted for. We looked at doing the boilers here and the rooftop unit over the 230 gym, kind of a conjunction together. But the prices were coming in far too high, so we are proceeding with the rooftop unit over there, and we have to hold on to the boilers for another year.
So if there are no other questions, I'll put these motions 1 and 2 forward.
Seconded by Mrs. Jones. Last opportunity for questions or comments on building and grounds 1 and 2. Seeing none, ask the secretary to please poll the board.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Cabrera?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Before moving on to the next topic, which is a little business, I don't think there's anything under strategic planning at this point. As we mentioned, we have the meeting on the 3rd. Okay. So then, moving into old business, where any topic is available. I don't know if there's any member of the board who wishes to discuss a particular topic. No, then what we'll do, as I had indicated, we will spend some time reviewing the board self-evaluation and for 2018. And just as explanation for the members of the public, the New Jersey School Boards Association has a self-assessment that all school boards must perform. So it's each member of the school board, the 9 members of the school board, and our superintendent and our business administrator must all go through this survey where we're judging how we're, well, first of all, we speak about what the values of certain aspects of school board operations are. And then we go through each of them, one by one, a series of questions which discusses how each of us perceives the board is performing these, and then really personal assessment of how you as a board member feel you're performing in these areas. And then school boards consolidates all of the information and sends it to us. So going through this assessment is part of the CUSAC requirement, but we've done it every year anyway now, but now CUSAC's looking very very closely at these things. We met the target to get it completed by. I don't think the assessment within the group is part of CUSAC actually, but we wanted to do that, to be able to share any comments, anything that you saw as you were going through it. And then I pulled out from last year, the results that we had from last year. I was trying to look for year-to-year comparisons for that. So I think that the way I'd like to do this is for it to be a very open discussion. I'll kind of lead with some of the comments there, some of the observations I made going through it, and but then at any point, if you have a comment you'd like to interject or a contrary view of something, then of course it'd be good for discussion. So the first element was the rating of the values, and so that was not where we were trying to decide how we were doing in a particular area, but rather how we judged each of these areas in importance to the board as far as our operations go. And we were, as I look through, I think the important takeaway is that we were all very consistent in that there were none of these values that, or none of these aspects of the board that anyone felt was only somewhat important or less. So everything was judged to be very important, or vital. When I compare, and that was the first chart that which was page, I think it was page 16, and it shows in the light color how we valued that particular aspect of, and again, for the benefit of the public, the areas are planning, policy, student achievement, finance, board operations, board performance, board superintendent relations, board staff relations, and board and community. So as we look through that, how we rated all of those as what value they are to a functioning board, again, very consistent. And when I compared it to so the average, if you just kind of eyeball across, out of 4, everybody was around the 3.5. I would say even maybe 3.6 for all, just across the board. When I looked at last year, it actually shows an evolution that I think we're understanding the importance, even more importance of these aspects and how we do it, and that there's of these operational aspects that there's nothing unimportant, which just means we have to try to be more challenging in all of those areas. So then looking at, then moving into the assessment of each area and how we, there's 18 pages. I'm not going to go through each page, but the page that shows something I think that's important was on page 17, the board to individual performance. And so this is, you look for each of these areas at how you feel the board is performing and how you feel you are performing. And in most of the areas, on average, each of us as individuals felt we were not performing as well as the board as a whole, which I think is a healthy thing, because it means that we're all looking to improve how we're doing it, which is good. And that was actually one of the comments that came in the comment section. Several people mentioned wanting to find more training, or wanting to be able to get involved with more training on board operations and board methodology. The two areas where there was a departure from that was in planning and in board community relations. And there, as I read the comments, I think the factor that really weighed heavily in that was the referendum. I think we might have seen something different had we done this before the referendum. So in a way, I think it's good that it was done after the referendum. But I saw a very common theme that almost to the individual, there were comments about concern of how to receive better understanding from the community and to be able to communicate more effectively to the community. So and it was at either side of that list of board performance characteristics, communications with the community and planning effort. And as we went through on pages 14 and 15 is really where there were a lot of comments. That's where all of the comments were gathered as far as what we feel the highest priority is, what we feel we need to spend additional effort on. And so the common themes as I went through it was that the referendum again was mentioned multiple times. The biggest challenge being the facilities improvements that we've identified and how we'll go about accomplishing those. The all-day kindergarten was mentioned multiple times throughout the assessment, so, clearly something I think that's a common priority for the members of the board. The math and science infrastructure to support, our students as we go forward. And another one that came up several times was this issue that I think we struggle with a lot, which is having a meaningful yardstick to assess student performance by, because the state changes changes the factors that you're measuring success by quite frequently. It's difficult to year compare performance, and it seems like that was a common, an area where there was a common desire to better define that. So, I think what comes out of this is we want to look for how we do things differently, how we invest in time more than money probably, but time to help board members feel more accomplished and confident in the way we're going about things. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and ask for some feedback from the rest of the group, or questions, if you had questions or comments on the assessment. Yes.
So I would say that I had the same takeaways as you. So overall, I thought that that overall the evaluations were very strong, both at the certainly at the values level, but also at the board and the self-evaluation in terms of folks feeling like the board is performing in the way that a strong board should perform. So I saw lots of evidence of that fairly consistently through the results. I think with respect to the individual and the board communication with the public, that also sort of jumped out to me as an opportunity, and also I think very much something that's of real interest for the board and for the community right now following the referendum. And I think part of what we can action as we sort of work through the process for evaluating the feedback that we're getting from the initial referendum and thinking through any future plans is how we, as a board, communicate with the public. I thought it was telling that the individual bar on that response was higher, because I know every board member is very active in the community and dedicated a lot of time to having conversations with people at every opportunity. But we didn't necessarily have a board voice outside of our board meetings, and I think that there would be an opportunity for more substantive dialogue back and forth if we had that. So I think that's something to think about. I know we've had discussions about it in the past, and I think it's something that's actionable and specific and tangible that we can focus on, not just in the context of referendum and facility planning, but in the context of just the overall functioning of the board.
Yes.
In the past, we used to have people from school boards. Diane, do you remember this? We had people come in, they would give,
Right.
we had questions as board members, they would come in and, talk to us about it and tell us like the procedures that we should do. And it was very informative, and we got points or something. But maybe we could find out what other programs that they would come and speak to us about.
Yes, so actually, I had a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Matt Lee, who's he's our resource, field representative. He's interested in doing that, of reestablishing that. He asked me, he said, we've done that in the past, I'm not sure why we're not doing it more consistently. My comment was that I don't think it was a a conscious decision not to, more a matter of timing with different, conflicts and that sort of thing. And I didn't have a chance to speak with Mr. Hurley about it, but that would be my thought, that we might want to get more.
Yeah. When Al Annunziata retired several years ago, Al was a fixture annually here at board meetings. And when Matt came on board, I think it was just the happenstance of Matt finding his way in the new job and us, kind of not getting used to having someone come. He'd come in to either do the evaluation, or sometimes he'd come in to talk about the superintendent's evaluation, or so, whatever the topic, or if there was a particular issue that the board is questioning what their role should or should not be, he could come and address that. I see Matt monthly at our superintendent's meetings, and I could certainly, if and when, it's an easy contact to make, is what I'm saying, if you need.
Just adding to that, what Shelley was referring to, we used to have the field rep come in when we established the goals, the board
Right.
goals.
Right.
And
They'll
the
work on that
rest of
too,
it.
right.
And they came in on that. We had the paper all the way around the room and so forth. There is a opportunity to see Matt and others on November 27th, which is a Tuesday night, right here at the Holiday Inn. That is the next Bergen County
Right.
meeting. They start at 6 o'clock. They feed you. You're home by 9 o'clock. It's local. If you can make it, you can just sign up online and go. It's no charge to the district.
And aside from the board having someone come to a board meeting, there are those county meetings. There are also a plethora of trainings available online, and Q&As and things of that nature. So if you haven't, perused the school board's website, it's a good thing to look at. They do offer things. But, I think Matt now, we had Matt here once, 2 years ago, I think. And I think just even in terms, even if it's just not a major presentation, it might be good for everybody to get at least to meet him. And if you weren't on the board when he was here a couple of years ago.
And even for him, to continue on with this desire, good desire, I think, to become more effective board members. He might be able to speak to us about the resources, explain a little bit more about the resources available either as a board or as individuals through school boards, because it is, it's a very active organization that's, their focus is education of children.
So if you want to reach out, let me know when you plan on doing that, so we look at a board meeting that would be more conducive. And if you want me to reach out down the road, I see him, like I said, a minimum of monthly. So I can reach out to him as well. Okay?
Okay. Any other comments?
Along
Yes.
those lines, at the Governance 2 training, I spoke about Lee for about 10 minutes, but there's about 20 people behind me that also wanted that time with him. So I kind of made him stay an extra half hour because I had some time with him. But it'd be great to have someone come in and give us some more direction on
Okay.
how to do things.
Yes.
And it's very important, because when people come in and they ask us questions and we talk, we get to know what other board members are like. For instance, Greg and I sit next to each other for how many years? We never even talked until we ran together. It was something. He said, the only thing you do is you ask me for a pencil, I never get them back. So that's the only conversations we've ever had. So if you have someone else here
Right.
that can bring information out, or get to know, help us get to know the other board members, it makes it a little easier for us just to come Mondays and,
Okay.
feel part of the whole.
To Mrs. Jones's point about the county meetings, I think, and I haven't been able to, I've attended some, but haven't been able to attend as many as I would like because of other commitments. But, a great thing with that is you are in a room with school board members from other districts. It gives an opportunity for, some cross-pollination of ideas, and what are you doing, what are your challenges, that sort of thing. So that's all, very, it's part of the totality of.
Look, every month I go to the superintendent's roundtable. Mr. Kelly goes to the business administrators roundtable monthly for the county. There are times when your schedule is tight and it's a couple hours in the morning and you think you could be, your time could be better served here in the office. In going there, though, to your point, Mr. McLean, is that, you get to hear things that other districts are going through and how they're approaching certain issues and how they're, there's a collegiality. And, sometimes it just reinforces for you that the path you're taking is a good one. Sometimes what it does is it makes you question the path, or sometimes it helps you find a path. So I would encourage, board members, if you can, to attend. I think I find the meetings that I go to for the superintendents to be, even if I'm not actively involved, it's a networking. You hear and you interact, which is a good thing. And also, in a time of a real issue, it gives you all a resource outside of your own circle that you could just say, hey, I'm up against this, and how did you guys handle it? What do you think? So that's, sometimes it doesn't have to be the big, oftentimes it doesn't have to be the big presentation or the formal workshop. These little coffee hours can give you a good deal of information. So I would encourage that. But if you do want Mr. Lee, I would just say one thing before we move on. Let's come up with a specific, area for him to come to speak about, so he comes prepared. And I don't want to open him up to a buffet table worth of questions.
Right. Okay.
Well,
Yes.
well, I would suggest that we consider, maybe among other topics, so back to my earlier point, how boards are now communicating outside of a sort of formal setting as this one, through media like social media or other types of engagement where people are speaking on behalf of the board, if that's happening in other places. I think that is something that it would help us to have some clarity on and maybe learn some best practices with respect to.
And the larger issue of communication, I understand what, Ms. Barrera, what you're saying is, what can the board do as a group? What should they do?
Right.
That sort of thing. But the other larger area of communication has been a talking point in all of my meetings that I've been having, to get a sense, and it's going to be a talking point too in the survey I mentioned, to get a sense of where people get their information from and, what they're looking for. In one of the meetings I had today, and I said I'm not going to speak much about any of the meetings till they're all done, but just kind of hypothetically, the level of, there's so much communication that comes out of any organization, and yet the complaint that most organizations hear is there's not communication. So, trying to find the one that hits, and then how to function within that medium is the challenge. So I don't think this board has done a poor job of putting it out. It's a question of are folks taking it in, and we have to try to find that balance. And that has been a discussion point at many of our meetings.
Yes.
One more thing, speaking of communications, the Delegates Assembly is this Saturday. I will be going down. There are no resolutions, which is highly unusual. However, Senator Steve Sweeney and Lucille Davy, the previous Education Commissioner, will be there to discuss how to control pension and health care costs. So that should be a very interesting discussion, and I will report back on that. That's this Saturday.
Okay.
There are a bunch of legislative stuff, we skipped that, but it doesn't matter. Just print it out. There are lots of ones on school bus rules and things that are online under New Jersey School Board's legislative update. I just printed it and it all comes out. Thank you.
Okay, and, just, I guess, kind of a, what is it with me?
No, sorry.
It's just as kind of a punctuation on, I think, on what we've been discussing, and the fact that this board and community relationships was the one where we collectively felt the board got a lower rating than we did as individuals. That's not the whole story, or the entire story, as Paul Harvey used to say, because if you look at the questions, if you look at the questions that went into each of those consolidated answers, it really is a different set of questions, but it was meaningful, I thought, that the issue of anticipating community issues and trends, of building partnerships within the community, business and government, and having an effective community relations program. We didn't rate ourselves as a board badly, but that's where we gave ourselves the lowest marks. And again, I think flavored largely because of the outcome of the referendum, which understandably was the center of gravity for all of our thought processes during the last year, right? So it's normal that it's unsurprising that would flavor this. But as we said, it's the catalyst now for, as we're reformulating, coming up with our next step.
Yes.
To think about.
Yes.
So nowhere near as good a job as Matt would have done had he been here to go through it, but I don't know if
You
there's
haven't
any.
met
Yeah, well, we don't know. That's true. I never saw him. So I don't know if there are any last comments, or we'll close this topic. Yes. Dr. Racine.
One thing back to, he told us how we stood to other districts as well.
I asked that question, and he was reticent to give me any kind of comparative information. He said because it's really about how we judge ourselves as opposed to.
I would say this, that's not in a lot of cases, comparisons and contrasts are valid if you're looking at, how your algebra scores are, something like that. But I think boards are a very interesting dynamic in the communities that represent and how they're selected and how they're functioning and the histories and the traditions and the superintendent and what she or he is all about. I mean, there's such they're very different organizations. I think in terms of ethics and in terms of law and policy, there's similarities. But in terms of functionality, I think that's may not be a fair way to judge yourself, especially when the rating's a self-rating. So I think the thing we might want to lean on, or you may want to lean on if you're interested, is more to Sally's point of if other districts have had effect, if other boards have communicated effectively, what have they done? Or if we want to do the following on social media, is that within the ethical and legal domain of the board? But I think the comparison and contrast gets a little dicey with boards because there's a lot of other issues involved in how a board functions.
That said, I'll go back, and it wasn't Matt because I don't think I was here when he was here, but in the past I remember one of the field service reps speaking about the fact that as a board, the individuals rated themselves lower than the board, which they said is healthy, because if you see the opposite situation where board members rate themselves far above the board in every category, then it's especially if it's widespread. If you have 9 people all rating themselves up here and their work together here, it probably means they're overestimating themselves, right? And so most of the time we're saying as individuals, we're below how the board performs as a group, which I think is certainly good in the spirit of teamwork and understanding that we're all just a piece of it. I think that the areas where we rated our performance above the boards, it has a direct link to the referendum and the fact that we were disappointed with our performance in that regard.
It would be interesting if we had a deadline of September 30th, how this evaluation would
Yeah, well,
come out.
I think it would have been a different
I think
outcome.
it
So
would have been.
and that's, but I think this is, I'm glad it wasn't, because I think this has spurred some healthy
And do we want to do that
thought
next year?
process. We may want to.
Earlier?
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, let's get the next
Yeah,
year
let's
next
get
year.
let's
Just
get to where
one
I know.
more.
I'm trying to get through tonight.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Now,
just
yes.
one more comment on that. So I do think that one thing that is very clear as you read through the evaluation is that people took their time in filling it out. And so, I think that alone sort of speaks to the strength of the board. This came at a very busy time. I know everybody on this board had many different pulls of their time. following, right on the heels of the referendum, clearly from the results. So not only did you see a sort of consistency of response, which means that I think people were responding in a thoughtful way. It wasn't that the results were scattered, but also the comments that were optional were thoughtful and comprehensive. So, I mean, again, I think it just speaks to the credit of the entire board that we're really committed to giving the process, giving ourselves, giving the board a hard look, and looking to see what we can improve on moving forward.
Yeah, continuous improvement, for sure. While we're on the subject of school boards now, will there be some mandatory training for the 3 that are re-elected?
No.
Yes,
Depends.
legal update they have to do.
Shelley, as she has been re-elected, will have to take governance 4 in her first year of the next term. You've been through 1, 2, and 3, so you'll be up for 4. Sergio was probably on 2. She'll have to do governance 2.
Okay. And then any of the rest of the board that's required?
No, I think everybody's pretty much up to date. We looked into that about a month ago, and we reached out to people, and they were taking things. We'll double check again.
Okay, thank you.
And not to belabor the Matt Lee conversation, the new CSA evaluation this year, maybe that would be a good thing to have Matt come and present, because it'll be a totally new process for all of us, and that may be the topic to bring him in late winter, early winter. We don't do it till April or May, and so maybe that would be a good way to get him in with something that's while he's here, certainly the conversation can also go into some other areas. So
Okay.
maybe at the very least I'll talk to him about that.
Okay. Very good. Any other, so if we're done with this one, we've beaten that to death. Any other topics that's anyone would like to bring up? No? So if I can find my agenda, we'll move out of the old business. Legislative update,
She
you
did.
did kind of, you snuck it in.
I thought you were going to give it.
So nothing else on that?
Right.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then although we've had a period of comment by the public, 8:50 PM, I'll open the floor one more time for public comment, should anyone care. At 8:50 yes?
Hi, Hisham Mahmoud, 259 Orient Way. Actually, I have 2 questions. Why the robotic club was taken out of Union School? I was surprised to find out that they're not meeting after schools anymore, considering how well they performed last year. That's my first question. As you know me, I always come up with more questions. There is a situation here by the emergency exit by the pool. I believe it's hazardous because the emergency exit is completely blocked by vegetation and some other objects. If you can look at it, I would really appreciate it. You know which exit I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. The emergency exit facing the field.
Okay, we'll look at that. I'm not aware of that. I'm not also aware of the robotic club's not meeting after school. I know the robotic club is still functioning, and I'll inquire about what's going on with it.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments? At 8:51, we close the meeting to the public for comment. And we do have a need for executive session this evening.
2 issues, student-related.
2 student-related issues, and there was a personnel?
Well, that's student-related.
Okay, so.
So moved.
We'll be gone 15 minutes, no action will be taken. Moved by Ms. Rivera.
So it's just student?
The student?
They're students.
Yeah, students, yeah. And seconded by Dr. Racine. All in favor? Aye. Aye, opposed? We're in executive session. Thank you.